Previously, a traveler ventured into the pine-shadowed wilderness of Gurdon, Arkansas, chasing whispers of a ghost light that haunted the tracks. What they found was more than myth. As night fell, the forest warped into something alien, and the light came closer. Now, we return to those woods. The air is colder, the silence is heavier, and the light is no longer content to be watched. Welcome to part 2 of The Gurdon Light, Phantom of the Tracks. As our traveler stumbles through the twisted forest, they begin to see things, echoes of a murder long buried, flashes of betrayal carved into the very soil beneath the trees. William McLean's final moments are no longer legend, they're memory. And they're not the traveler's memories to bear. But something deeper is stirring. A presence that doesn't just haunt the tracks. It owns them. As the forest paths twist into impossible loops, the traveler will learn what locals have long feared. The Gurdon Light isn't just a ghost, it's a reckoning. So, are you ready to see what waits in the dark? Subscribe to MindFuel, where truth and terror meet, and every story dares you to keep listening, because in this chapter we learn that some lights guide you home, and some never let you leave. Sleep, if you could even call it that, brought no relief. The traveler woke with a start just after sunrise, drenched in cold sweat, the remnants of something terrible still clinging to the edges of their mind. It hadn't been a dream. Not exactly. The sensation was something closer to falling into someone else's memory, and being unable to wake up until it had finished playing out. And yet, as they sat up in the bed of the roadside inn, the sensation still lingered, like they hadn't left the woods at all. They dressed slowly, unsure if they were more afraid of what they'd seen or what they now felt. It was subtle at first. Walking back into town, the traveler noticed people watching them differently, not just out of curiosity, but recognition, as if they were carrying something with them, something others could see but wouldn't speak of. An old man seated on a bench near the hardware store wouldn't make eye contact. A child, holding her mother's hand, turned her head sharply as they passed and whispered, "Don't look too long, or he'll show you too." But the traveler wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Not when they still didn't understand what had happened. That night, they returned to their room, locked the door, and spread the charred diary across the desk. Most of the pages were blackened beyond saving, but one, just one, remained legible. A small entry, faint handwriting. They said I was to blame, but I warned them. I saw the rail shift. I felt it in my bones. No one listened, not even McLean. The traveler froze. Lewis McBride. It wasn't just madness or rage, as the records claimed. There had been something else, something unspoken. And then the room changed. No warning, no sign, just silence. The dull hum of the air conditioner vanished. The light bulb above began to flicker, then dimmed completely. And in the quiet, the traveler felt the air stretch, like the space around them had pulled taut, just before snapping. Then the walls faded. The floor beneath them warped into rough, compacted gravel. The desk, the bed, the walls, gone. They were no longer in the motel. They were standing beside the railroad, but not in the present. The sky above was soot gray. The trees looked younger, thinner. The air smelled of hot metal and sweat. There were voices, real this time, echoing down the line. 2 men stood 20 feet ahead. One was tall, stocky, coat rolled up to the elbows, calloused hands gripping a clipboard and pacing with purpose. The other stood still, lean, nervous, eyes darting with unease. William McLean and Louis McBride. The traveler knew their names, though neither man had yet turned fully toward them. The argument was already in motion. "You've been warned twice already, Lewis," McLean said, his tone clipped and impatient. "We got a schedule to meet. I don't have time for your Tremors and ghost stories. Lewis's hands were shaking. "I'm telling you, sir," he said. "There's something wrong with the line. Section 9's vibrating. You ever feel track steel hum like that without a train in a 10-mile radius?" McLean turned to him, stern. "It's the heat warping the rail or bad ballast underneath. You file a report and we'll check it in the morning." Lewis shook his head. "It's not the ballast, it's—" He stopped, swallowed hard. McLean stepped in closer. "It's what?" Lewis looked him dead in the eyes. "They walk under the rail." McLean stiffened. "I saw them," Lewis continued, voice cracking, "crawling like shadows between the cross ties, like they were waiting for the right time to push up and out." McLean scoffed, half amused, half exasperated. "You been drinking?" "No, sir." "You accusing the line of being haunted?" "I'm saying we need to shut it down for tonight. Just one night. Let me show you." McLean stepped away, pulled something from his belt. A lantern. It glowed orange in the dusk. "Then come show me," he said. "You want to waste my time with ghosts? You'd better have proof." The two began walking eastward. The traveler tried to follow, but found their legs wouldn't move, stuck in place, frozen between past and present. The sky dimmed. Something began humming, not from above, from below. The gravel at their feet shifted, and then came the screaming. Not one man, both. First, McLean's voice, angry, demanding, then a sharp crack, metal on bone. McLean fell, lantern flung into the air, landing some 10 feet away, still burning. Lewis's voice rose next, frantic. I'm sorry. They said it had to be you." Then silence again. The lantern blinked out, and the vision shattered. The traveler collapsed onto the motel floor, gasping, sweating. The clock on the wall read 3:33 a.m. Everything was back to normal, but they weren't. The vision had shown more than just McLean's death. It had revealed the betrayal. Lewis wasn't acting alone. There had been others, whispers, a voice in his head. They said it had to be you. What had McLean done? What secret had the railroad buried beneath its miles of steel and timber? The traveler sat there, staring at the diary on the desk. Something had changed in them. The light was no longer a mystery to unravel. It was a judgment to be passed, and they had seen enough to know. The tracks weren't haunted by a spirit lost. They were marked by something ancient, something that demanded payment, and always got it. In the next chapter, the traveler begins to hear things, voices not just in the woods, but in recordings, in the wind, even in their own speech. The past isn't done speaking, and the truth is almost ready to surface. Subscribe to MindFuel. Fuel your nightmares. One echo at a time. By dawn, the traveler had made their decision. There were no more theories to unravel, no rationalizations to cling to. Whatever was tied to those tracks, to that light, wasn't just a remnant of history. It was awake, it was watching, and it wasn't finished. The traveler packed quickly. No breakfast, no coffee. They left the room just as the sun began its slow ascent over the horizon, casting golden light across the dew-drenched windows of the Gurdon Inn. Their car waited out front, dusty from the back roads, keys trembling in hand. All they had to do was leave. But something tugged, not at their body, at their sense of direction. They took the same road they came in on, a winding path that cut through the outer stretch of forest before hitting the main highway. GPS locked in. The voice even chirped with calm assurance. Turn left in 1 mile. But the road stretched and never turned. Every few minutes, they'd glance down at the dashboard's screen. The glowing blue line rerouted again and again, constantly recalculating, recalculating, recalculating. Finally, the traveler stopped the car, pulled to the shoulder, rolled down the window, and listened. Nothing. No chirping birds, no wind through the leaves, no distant trucks on the highway. It was as if the forest had swallowed sound itself. They stepped out, boots crunching the gravel shoulder. The scent of pine, dust, and something faintly coppery clung to the air. With every breath, a pressure built in their ears, like being slowly submerged underwater. They walked back the direction they came, 50 feet, 100, looking for landmarks, signs, anything. Nothing. No gas stations, no mile markers, no tire tracks but their own. And then they saw it, at the far end of the curve, the railroad crossing, the same one they'd passed on their way out of town, the same crossing that had no working signals, the one whose gates had been rusted halfway open for years. It was impossible. They hadn't turned around, hadn't veered off the road, and yet, here it was again, unmistakable, and beyond it. That same damn forest trail, the one leading back toward the old tracks. They got back in the car, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, and drove faster this time, keeping an eye on the sun, the sky, the clouds overhead. For a while it felt normal. Trees on both sides, light shifting through the branches, a winding path that could have belonged to any rural town. But then, the temperature began to drop. Fast. The traveler exhaled, and their breath fogged the windshield. The dashboard thermometer blinked in confusion, jumping from 68 to 42 in seconds. They pulled over again, shivering. This time, when they stepped out, the forest was waiting. That's the only way they could describe it. The trees seemed closer now, leaning in from both sides, branches arched high above the road, forming a tunnel of knotted bark and shadow. Every step they took echoed, not from gravel, but from something deeper, like walking across an empty auditorium stage. And then they heard it, far off, that same hum from the tracks, low, relentless, mechanical, yet mournful. The Gurdon light wasn't visible, not yet, but its presence was near. The traveler could feel it. They turned and ran. Back to the car, slammed the door, ignition, headlights flaring to life, and still, they weren't alone. In the mirror, just beyond the trunk, two shapes moved between the trees, not walking, gliding, faces just out of focus, shoulders slumped like they'd been dragging something heavy for a long, long time. The car roared forward. This time, they didn't take the road. They cut off into a side path, an old maintenance route they remembered seeing on a map their first night in town. It curved west. It should have brought them to the river and eventually back to Route 67. But the forest refused to let go. Every turn brought them back to the same junction. Every landmark repeated itself, an old mailbox, a leaning pine, a shattered traffic sign with no legible words. It was looping. They were stuck. Whatever had taken hold of Gurdon's woods wasn't content with being seen. It wanted the traveler to understand something, to remember. They stopped once more, turned off the engine, stepped out into the silence, and this time, the path in front of them was different. Not road, track, old, twisted, covered in moss, but unmistakably railroad, and at the far end, barely visible through the trees, a glow, not warm, not welcoming, a cold, blue-white flicker. The traveler should have run, but they didn't. They were tired of fleeing. They stepped onto the gravel bed, followed the track, one step at a time. Every crunch beneath their boots echoed down the corridor of trees. And with every step, something whispered in the leaves overhead. Not English, not even words, just sound, patterned, rhythmic, like breathing, like waiting. The light pulsed once, then again, brighter, and as they approached, the air thickened, not hot, but dense, heavy, as if space itself were being squeezed, and suddenly, they were no longer walking. They were standing still, not by choice. The tracks beneath their feet pulsed, alive. And then, something shifted in their vision. The forest, bent, the sky above fractured, light filtered in reverse, and a scream, not their own, ripped across the tree line. The light surged forward, and all went dark. The traveler thought they could escape, but the woods never forgot, and the Gurdon light never let go. In the next chapter, trapped between time and memory, the traveler wakes in a different version of Gurdon, one not found on any modern map. Subscribe to MindFuel for stories that won't leave you, even when you think you've left them. There was no sky, no sun, no moon, no stars, only a canopy of motionless branches overhead, frozen mid-sway, as though the entire forest had been paused between heartbeats. The traveler awoke not on the gravel trail where the light had consumed them, but in the middle of a clearing surrounded by perfectly still trees. The air had no temperature. The ground, though solid, felt hollow beneath them, like walking on stretched canvas over a deep, echoing chamber. And the silence. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was deliberate, the kind of silence that listens. They moved slowly now. The panic that had gripped them earlier had receded, not gone, but replaced by something heavier. Acceptance, maybe, or instinct. Because deep down, they knew. They weren't in Arkansas anymore. Not the Arkansas marked on maps, not the Gurdon spoken of in tourist books or ghost tours. They were somewhere older, somewhere remembered only by the land itself, and waiting at the far edge of the clearing. It pulsed, the Gurdon light. It no longer flickered. It breathed soft surges of bluish-white light, inhaling and exhaling with slow, unnatural rhythm. It hovered just above the tracks. No visible source, no lantern, no figure. But the moment the traveler looked into it, they saw everything, not with eyes, not with thought. The light showed them. It began in the 1930s, the noise of hammers and wheels, the stench of sweat and oil. The railroad was more than transportation, it was survival. Every man on that crew had mouths to feed, debts to pay, pasts to forget. William McLean, the foreman, was respected. Feared, maybe. But he did his job. And beneath that hard exterior, he carried something he never spoke of. A sickness, not of the body, but of the soul. A thing buried deep. Louis McBride. Wasn't like the others. He didn't drink with them. Didn't laugh. He stared too long at things. Trees, the sky, the way shadows bent around the gravel. He heard things, felt the hum of the rail before it vibrated, knew when a storm would come by the tremor in his knuckles. He said the earth remembered, that it whispered. The others mocked him, but McLean didn't. Not at first, until the day the rail gave out beneath one of the freight trains. A split in the track McBride claimed he warned them about. No one listened. Lives were lost. A body crushed. McLean blamed McBride, said he'd lied, covered it up, and then things got worse. McBride stopped speaking altogether. He worked, yes, but each swing of the spike maul seemed heavier. As if he weren't hitting metal, but memory. Until one morning, in the gray hush before dawn, McLean's body was found beside the rail, skull shattered, the maul still upright in the soil beside him like a marker. They never let McBride speak. The town made their decision, called the sheriff, dragged him away. He was executed by year's end. But here's the thing, McBride never confessed. And not because he was stubborn, not because he was angry, but because he knew something the rest of them didn't. It wasn't him He saw what really happened, and no one believed him. The traveler stumbled back, the visions cracking across their mind like lightning. But the light kept them anchored, rooted. And now, it wasn't just showing them history. It was asking something, demanding. The traveler felt it, the collective weight of guilt, not just from McBride, not from McLean, but from the town. The stories whispered across generations, the ones bent for convenience, tailored for tourism, made into spooky fun for weekend thrill seekers and late-night documentaries. No one came to listen. They came to watch, to chase, to consume, but never to understand, never to make amends. The light pulsed again, stronger now, brighter, but instead of searing, it revealed. The traveler now saw faces, dozens, hundreds, men with soot-stained cheeks and calloused hands, women in mourning black, children standing by cold stoves, generations of Gurdons forgotten, each with a story swallowed by time, each with a voice silenced by someone else's truth. The traveler dropped to their knees, tears streaking down their dirt-caked face. Not from fear, but from knowing. They were never meant to escape, because escape wasn't the point. The light didn't want revenge. It wanted witnesses, someone to see, to carry the truth. Not in headlines or ghost tour scripts, but in memory. To remember what really happened. And never let it die again. The Gurdon light is not a ghost. It is not a trick of science. It is a memory given form, a living echo of injustice and silence. And now, the traveler knows. But in a place where time folds and the tracks never end, knowing may not be enough. In the next chapter, the traveler tries to return to the world they knew, but something followed, a presence, a light, not to harm, but to remind. Subscribe to MindFuel. Because stories like this don't end when the lights go out. They begin. By morning, the light had receded. It didn't vanish. It watched from the edge of the trees, flickering faintly in the mist. The traveler stood alone. No trail to follow, no map to consult. Only the tracks, still stretching out in both directions, bleeding into fog that didn't rise or shift. And, in their hands, a diary. McLean's final words, scribbled thoughts, confessions, regrets, some legible, others warped by water and time. Among them, a single passage underlined in jagged strokes. If a man dies wrongfully, the earth won't keep quiet. You must return what was taken, where it was taken. Only then will the hammer stop swinging. There were no instructions, no spells, no chants. Just that. Return what was taken. The traveler didn't know why they were doing it, why they felt compelled to go back to the exact stretch of tracks where the mall had once fallen, why they carried with them items they'd found. A rusted nail, a piece of coal, a folded paper with the initials LM. Each item felt wrong in their pack. Heavy, warm. They'd left offerings before, pine branches, whiskey, coins, things meant to pacify spirits, ease guilt. But this wasn't about peace. This was about truth. And truth demands something more. The traveler stood beside the tracks. It was silent again, but not the kind of silence from before. This time, it was expectant, curious, the kind of silence that leans in. They arranged the items on the rail bed like puzzle pieces in dirt. The nail at the head, the coal near the center, the paper folded beneath the track. And then, they took out the diary. It trembled in their grip. Not from wind, not from nerves, but as if something inside it still lived. They opened it to the last page, and without knowing why, read aloud the final words written in ink, so faded it looked like dried blood. Forgive me, Lewis. I saw it too. I was just too scared to say. The forest answered. A wind rolled through, not from the treetops, but from beneath the ground, pushing upward like a breath long held and finally exhaled. And the light surged forward. It didn't flicker. It blazed, not threatening, not angry, but full. The way flame catches oil, the way memory erupts when the right name is spoken aloud after years of silence. It surrounded the items, and then nothing, no bang, no burst, just darkness complete. When the traveler opened their eyes, it was daytime. Birdsong, a rustle in the underbrush, and the feeling of gravity returning, subtle but unmistakable. They were lying beside the tracks again. The rail was cool beneath their fingers, and the items, gone. Even the diary. At first, it felt like awakening from a dream, until they noticed. The silence had changed. It no longer listened. It rested. They made it out of the woods. No signs remained. No eerie glow. No ghostly apparitions. Just rusted track and wild overgrowth. But as they walked away, one thing remained impossible to shake. They weren't sure if they'd put McLean to rest, or awakened something older. That light hadn't just shown them the past, it had reached inside them, etched something onto their soul. And now, when they closed their eyes at night, they saw it again, not from a distance, not across the tracks, but from within. Sometimes they'd see it flicker in mirrors, in windows, in the glint of metal rails on long-forgotten sightings. A quiet reminder. That, in some places. Justice isn't about closure. It's about acknowledgement. And memory isn't a thing we carry. It's a thing that carries us. They say the Gurdon light still appears, that you can walk the old tracks just off the interstate and catch a glimpse. Some call it a ghost. Others call it science. But those who've felt it, really felt it, will tell you something different. The light isn't hunting. It's waiting for someone who's willing to see, for someone who remembers what really happened in the woods, and is brave enough to carry the truth out again, even when the path home twists beneath their feet. Thank you for walking this track with us, if you're still with us and your hands aren't shaking too badly. Don't forget to subscribe to MindFuel, because some stories stay buried until you go looking for them. And when you do, they light the way, even if you wish they wouldn't. The traveler walked into town just after noon. No one had gone looking for them. No one had noticed they were gone. That in itself was strange. They had only been away a few nights, by their own count, but their clothes were stiff with dirt, their face hollow, eyes rimmed with red. A man at the gas station glanced up from behind the counter, did a slow double take, and offered a weak smile. "Been out in them woods, huh?" The traveler didn't answer. They just nodded. Because how do you explain that you've been somewhere few people return from, and something followed you back? Back at the motel, the traveler tried to sleep, but the light inside the room, fluorescent and clinical, buzzed at a frequency that pressed against their temples. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw the glow again, not distant, but near. Always near. And the dreams, if you could call them that, were replays. Over and over, the spike maul falling, the final breath of McLean, the sound of gravel shifting beneath ghostly footsteps, Lewis McBride's shadowed face, the diary in flames. One image lingered, a train car with no conductor, rolling slowly along a forgotten track through the forest, its single lantern swaying. Not forward, not backward, but side to side, as if searching. On the second day, the traveler visited the local diner. It hadn't changed. Same linoleum floor, same cracked booths, same waitress pouring refills without asking. They sat near the window, watching the trees sway in the distance like they were whispering. That's when the older man approached. Gray beard, frayed jacket, hands scarred from some kind of manual work. He sat without asking. "You saw it, didn't you?" the man said. The traveler didn't flinch, didn't speak. The man leaned closer, lowering his voice to just above a whisper. "You followed the tracks. Farther than you should have. Saw more than most." Still, the traveler said nothing. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "They always come back changed," he said, "if they come back at all." The traveler asked a single question. "How long has it been happening?" The man didn't need clarification. "Longer than the town's been here," he replied. McLean wasn't the first. He just gave it a story people could hang on to. But that light, that thing out there, it's older than railroads, older than names. Sometimes I think the tracks were laid down over something that didn't want to be disturbed. Sometimes I think the rails amplify it. He slid a business card across the table. Hollow Rock Historical Society. Then stood and walked away without looking back. That night, the traveler wrote everything down, not because they wanted to remember, but because forgetting was impossible. They described the first flicker of light, the looping paths, the diary, the ritual. They left out nothing. And then, for reasons they didn't fully understand, they printed several copies and left them in public places. On the bulletin board, at the gas station, at the foot of the Gurdon welcome sign, inside the county library, wedged between local history books. They weren't trying to scare people. They were trying to warn them, because no one warns you about how quiet it gets after the light disappears. No one warns you that you'll miss it, that you'll feel its absence like a pressure against your chest. No one warns you that something follows you, not on foot, but in memory. They returned home eventually, but home didn't feel the same. Sounds felt dulled, lights too bright. People spoke too loudly about things that didn't matter. They avoided trains, refused to cross tracks. And every so often, at night, they'd step out into their backyard and stare at the tree line behind their house, waiting, not because they wanted to see it again, but because they knew, somewhere deep in their bones, it would return. The Gurdon light wasn't done with them, not yet. The story should have ended. By any account, after the ritual was performed, after the traveler returned and warnings were whispered across town, the Gurdon light should have disappeared, faded into folklore, tucked itself neatly into the pages of local legend like so many other ghosts across the American South. But it didn't. It never really does. A week after the traveler left, a couple from Little Rock made a detour through Gurdon. The husband, a history enthusiast, had heard rumors online and convinced his wife to stop off for the night. Just 1 hour, he said. Just a glimpse of the old tracks. They never made it to the motel. Sheriff's logs show the call came in around 2:13 a.m., a frantic voice screaming about lights, about something moving through the trees. The call disconnected mid-sentence. Their car was found parked at the edge of the woods the next morning. Doors locked, headlights on, no sign of a struggle. But the seats were empty and the engine still warm. The only thing left behind? A small blackened stone on the dashboard, slick with what looked like soot or ash. When tested, it yielded no known composition. The wife's phone was found days later near the tracks. Its last photo was time-stamped at 2:11 a.m., a blurry image, out of focus. But in the center, a white orb, hovering, tilted, as if mid-sway. The locals have stopped talking openly about the Gurdon light. They've grown wary of who asks. And when they do speak, it's with a hush in their voices, as if even the words might summon something too close for comfort. A woman who runs a bait shop off Highway 67 keeps a worn-out Bible near the register now. She swears it's not for show, A man who once walked the tracks for fun now won't go near the woods after dusk, not even to retrieve his dog. And the conductor on the passing freight line? He's requested a route change. He said it was the third time in a month the engine's instruments went haywire just outside of Gurdon. Lights flickering, cabin temperature dropping by 20 degrees. And once, just once, he swears he saw a figure walking along the tracks, lantern swinging from side to side, before it simply vanished into the gravel. Some say the ritual failed. Some believe the traveler didn't lay the spirit to rest, but rather awakened something buried beneath decades of silence. That, what they thought was closure, was only a key. But there are others, quiet voices with longer memories, who suggest the Gurdon light was never about one man, one death, one injustice. They say the forest doesn't care about human names, that the light is older, that the death of William McLean simply tied it to a story we could understand. It's not searching for justice, it's not looking for peace. It's feeding on attention, on memory, on fear. The traveler was last seen 3 months later. A man in Mena, Arkansas, reported a stranger coming into his shop just before closing time. Mud-covered boots, distant eyes, said he was following a light. That was the last anyone confirmed. A rental car was later found near the Ouachita National Forest, empty. Inside the glove compartment was a notepad. The final page was torn out, but the impression of the pen was still visible, barely legible beneath the light. 3 words. It followed me. The Gurdon light still appears. It wavers at the edge of abandoned rails, flickers in the fog that settles low after midnight, dances just beyond reach. Locals don't chase it anymore. Visitors are warned. And those who ignore the warning, they leave changed, if they leave at all. Because some spirits were never meant to rest. Some lights never go out. They only wait. They say stories like these are passed down to keep curious souls out of the dark, to warn them that not everything that glows is meant to guide, that some lights lead you nowhere, or worse, somewhere you were never meant to go. The Gurdon light will continue to flicker, whether you choose to believe or not. It needs no audience. It follows no logic. It waits in silence just beyond the tree line. And while this story comes to a close, the land doesn't sleep. Because somewhere, just across the border, another place holds secrets just as old and just as restless. A lonely stretch of road in Louisiana, where shadows cross without a sound, where headlights sometimes catch things they shouldn't, where the line between myth and memory has worn thin. So ask yourself, are you ready to hear what waits on that forgotten back road? Do you really want to know what moves through the swamp at night, long after the last porch light has gone cold? Then don't look away. Not now, because what's coming next makes the Gurdon light look like a spark. If you think this tale was chilling, wait until you hear what's lurking in Louisiana. Subscribe to MindFuel and fuel your nightmares with every new upload.